Hey people, it's Niles talking. Now, I'd like to thank Disbeliever of Lies 6 for telling me about this story. So this is from lawandcrime.com. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez slams New York City judge for suspension of habeas corpus in response to George Floyd protests. Representative Cortez excoriated a New York City judge for purporting to revoke the writ of habeas corpus in response to widespread George Floyd protests late Thursday. Civil liberty protect ourselves from government using crises and emergencies as justification to dismantle our rights, she said in response to the shocking news via Twitter. This is suspension of habeas corpus. It is unconstitutional and is deeply disturbing that both NYPD is seeking it and a judge rubber stamped it. The writ of habeas corpus is a 900-year-old legal protection afforded to citizens against authoritarian impulses of law enforcement and executives which allow an advocate to argue that someone is being illegally confined, detained, or imprisoned. Is generally considered the bedrock of American and British legal systems. New York City Criminal Court James Burke agreed to a request by the New York City Police Department (NYPD) to allow for detention of anyone arrested in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan without criminal charges longer than the 24 hours mandated by state law during a hearing in response to a writ filed by the Legal Aid Society of New York City on behalf of hundreds of protesters still in jail. There is a crisis within a crisis, Burke said before denying the request. All writs are denied. Brooklyn, Bronx, and Manhattan. The judge later elaborated, saying there is a civil unrest crisis within the overarching COVID-19 crisis. To that end, the entire police department has been deployed, and the Manhattan's DA office is call all hands on deck and working to relieve the problem which are currently addressing. Burke continued, it's simply a fact the virtual part slowed down the pace of arraignment, including but not limited to technical issues. The hearing was conducted via Skype, and the judge was referring to the courts currently using remote hearing to deal with legal cases. Legally, the upshot of Burke's ruling is that the NYPD has been given the go-ahead to indefinitely detain both criminal looters and peaceful protesters who violate New York City's recently established curfew. Some, however, worried out loud about a potential slippery slope. People keep saying habeas corpus has been suspended in New York City for protests, but no, it's been suspended for everybody. Activist and podcast host Kate Willett said, anyone can be detained indefinitely for any reason in New York City right now. That's the whole thing. Habeas corpus exists to prevent the prospect of indefinite detention committed by American authorities is typically viewed as both a constitutional violation and an egregious affront to prized American liberty interests. In Hamdi v. Rumsfeld, the Supreme Court held that U.S. citizens have the right to challenge their status as so-called enemy combatants before an impartial judge, while foreign-born enemy combatants did not, in the process crafting a hotly disputed and constitutionally suspect regime of indefinite detention. The opinion is just as well known for the fulsome dissent offered by conservative Justice Antonin Scalia and joined by liberal Justice John Paul Stevens. The very core of liberty secured by our Anglo-system of separated powers has been freedom from indefinite imprisonment at the will of the executive. Scalia wrote, arguing that only Congress has the ability to suspend the writ of habeas corpus. New York law requires that a person be arraigned within 24 hours of arrest. The NYPD, however, argued, and Judge Burke agreed, that extreme measures were needed to maintain order due to unprecedented rage against the police department. Criminal lawyers and defense lawyers were not buying these arguments. They have no excuse for not processing them, legal aid attorney Marlon Bowden said after the ruling. The reason they are doing it is because the people are protesting police brutality. The police department has a history of deliberately delaying people's arraignment because they don't like what they're doing on the street. The NYPD has no excuse with its 38,000 police officers and the best technology in the world. With all the money they are being given, Bowden later added, they have no excuse not to process them in a timely manner. The NYPD's budget for 2020 is $5.9 billion. We are disappointed with the judge's ruling, which is wrong in the law and contrary to the protections afforded by the Roundtree v. Brown, the Legal Aid Society said in a statement provided to Law and Crime. However, since this writ was filed, some progress has been made to ensure the release of New Yorkers within 24 hours of their arrest. We will continue to monitor the situation, and we are fully ready to appeal if necessary. We are also disheartened, however, because the overwhelming number of people held illegally are those accused of charges that should have resulted in their automatic release. Lastly, while proclaiming not to be vindictive towards New Yorkers protesting police brutality, the NYPD faulted its own incompetence to distract from its duty to ensure that people are swiftly arraigned and brought before a judge. Motivations aside, the NYPD is fully responsible for the hundreds of New Yorkers who are currently languishing in cages, deprived of their due process rights, and an increased risk of contracting COVID-19. Civil liberties-focused non-profit and public interest law firm, the Center for Constitutional Rights, suggests that they would institute legal action in response to the judge's ruling. We won't stand for it, the group tweeted. I'll leave that for you to read. It's just a few tweets. But anyway, this is not something that is surprising for all the black people who live in New York City. You know that the law has always been suspended. Like, stop and frisk policy basically meant that the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution went out the window, and if they suspected you of a crime, they would search you and then create a reason for it later. I mean, poor Khalif Browder spent 3 years in jail on suspicion of a crime, and he was later found not guilty of it, and there was no crime ever proven to have been committed. But that didn't matter. He was tormented so badly by his experiences, he killed himself. And anyway, this is the country that wants to lecture other nations about human rights. And basically they say, well, if you protest us, we'll suspend the rule of law and throw people in jail indefinitely. This is absolutely disgusting. And New York City is the home of the United Nations. They're not even afraid of how it looks to all the ambassadors who are based there. Anyway, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. I'll leave this and some other articles in the description. Peace.